Hey builders, welcome back to another episode of what is going to become known as Weathering with Matt. We're going to continue with the scrubber today. Continuing from yesterday, we took and weathered all the top greeblies around the mohawk, added just the accents to show where oil and dirt would pile up. So we're going to go back to the back side now of the scrubber and work around the greeblies on the back and try to bring out some of the details in this. I'd already started a little bit previously, just doing some test runs. So you can see I added the oils and stuff here. And again, that's a combination of the brown and the black, just in the cracks and stuff where we're working at. And then you can see a little bit of the previous, kind of accidental weathering, but we will make that to work. This was an issue with some of the paint. When I went to put the clear coat over it, I actually piled it up too much and burnt the bottom paint. So you've got to be careful on that sort of thing when using different spray can paints. So we'll continue with where we left off. Again, we're just going to use black and brown on most of this, getting a lot of the areas on the inside that would just accumulate over generations of droid use. And just use the brush to put in really, kind of a large amount of paint, because you're going to end up just wiping this out to what you like. And just get it deep in all the cracks, crevices, crebi. Make sure to pay attention to all the places you might not even ever see, because the droid might end up upside down. You never know. And just wipe until you get a section, kind of you can see how that all changed from looking bright and yellow to now kind of more of a grimy look. And try to get where you don't really end up seeing, even with the microfiber, you can end up seeing what, kind of a brush stroke look. So just wipe in those areas until you don't see that, and just feather all of those away. It doesn't look like you purposely did it. Which we know we didn't. It was all just appeared that way. Okay, and then like on sections that would be what I think would be just totally dirty, I'll usually just fill all of those in with black and just wipe off the sections that you can get to. It's like in this section here, you can see the bright yellow color. To me, that section should probably be really dirty on the inside. It actually helps highlight that crack that was over the crevice. So we'll do the same thing inside of all the vents. If you get something where you can't get back in there, you can just use another brush on the end of the microfiber. Rub a little bit of that out. See, that looks much better and more defined. It doesn't have to be solid black. You can use some of the brown. What I like about, if you leave the black in there and then you put brown on top, you kind of start just getting more of a fade effect, which adds multiple colors. That's the thing to me with weathering, is that you need to have multiple layers. A lot of times you can get it with one layer with using oil bases, but this will just be the first initial layer. One thing with these oils and the way that you put them down, you can start out really light and get your effect on the first go around, and then if you want to go back darker, just go back and do it again. Repeat your process. You don't have to be in a big hurry on trying to get it done, especially if you're starting out. It's always better to go lighter than darker. It always seems to appear darker in photos. Another thing I like to do too, as I'm doing it, is actually grab my phone, because most of the time, I mean, we want our droids in pictures, so I'll grab the phone and actually take a picture, or actually look through the camera lens and see what the weathering's actually looking like, so that way you can kind of determine what others are going to see when you post your pictures online, without having to do a lot of edits to them or add filters. It's not Snapchat. Snap Droid. Should patent that one. And using the same brush for everything, all these darker colors. Another thing about these oil paints, a little goes a long way. I think with that one kit, I've weathered Wally several times, and a couple of other different droids. So even though you might spend 30 bucks for that little kit, it'll last you through several droids. Actually did R2 with it. And you can, like on R2, I left most of him shiny. So instead of doing the clear coat like I was talking earlier, I would just put the oil bases on and then let them dry. And eventually they get dry to the touch. They're actually really hard to wipe off. So I kind of like the vents. I'm going to leave those for a minute because I'm actually going to paint those gray. I'll go ahead and get all of the inside of these. You can see I've added some electronic boards, so I'm gonna just out of an old remote I'd cut up. So we'll weather some of those too. And these will probably take multiple layers. Actually, I haven't put any clear coat on these yet, so they don't hold the paint as well. So that's another thing on these. Once I put the initial coat of paint on, and before I start weathering, I actually spray it with the Krylon matte finish before I start. That actually helps the oil stick a little bit better and gives you the ability to, it doesn't stain that first layer of paint. so you can actually wipe it off a lot easier if you make a mistake and get something that you don't like. Got some areas I can't get in, so I'll get a little bit deeper brush. To get into those areas. Back to brush number 1. And we'll just keep doing the same thing. Add paint, add paint. Wipe paint off. If you see something you miss, go back. Another good thing about the oils is, I mean, this stuff is dry. Even the stuff I put up here probably an hour or so ago is still wet enough that I can just bleed the paints right back in. Or if I didn't like it, I could go and wipe it back off. It may start staining a little bit, you know, after that amount of time, but you can get a great deal of it off. Eventually, if you're as aggressive as I am with it, you end up wearing the bristles down on these brushes. So another good reason to just use the cheaper oil brushes you can get off Amazon. Get his upside down. As you can see, I mean, there's nothing quick about this. I mean, to get this back end done could take an hour or more. And just take your time. If you get a position where you're tired of working on it, you can actually, you don't have to clear coat it that night. You can leave it, just work on it the next day. It'll actually, you might even be able to go back over it and do another layer and not disrupt the previous layer you did without that clear coat. And depending on how big or small your model is, the less clear coat sometimes, especially if they're smaller, the clear coats will start piling up and start taking away some of your definition. So sometimes it's better to just let the oils dry and then go back over them. Okay. A little more into this section. And the same one. See a section there, so you would want to fill in that section because naturally it would be nice and dark. Okay, and we'll do a little more on the electronics board. Wipe some of that off so you can see those copper traces. And what I did on that board, I mean, it was a solid green board. In the beginning, I just took a Dremel tool to it and took it down, took the green coating off so that I could see the copper traces. Still using the browns and the black. After we get all of these colors in, some of the next phases will be coming in and adding highlights on a lot of these outside corners. We'll add some whites and silvers to actually look like you're scuffed down to the metal surface of the droid. And on your paints, whenever you put your amount of paint out, just don't put a lot out, because most of the time you'll end up putting out more than you need, and you end up wasting your paint because it will dry up the next day. There are some chemicals you can get, some mineral spirit, depending on the oils you get, mineral spirits or turpentine. I think that you can actually reactivate the oils with, but these are so cheap, I usually don't. I just throw away what I don't use. I was kind of wondering how well this was going to do, and it's actually looking really well. Just from all the scuffing of the Dremel tool, I just used a cutoff wheel. Actually made it hold the paint really well. Okay. Like I said earlier, another thing I like about the oils is that the oils, you can create almost any color you can think of with a couple of the basic colors. So I'm going to take a new brush and take some white and a little bit of black and make a gray. If you're doing something big that's going to require a lot of color, what I do this on Wally, I just made up a lot of that particular color and stored it back unless you can find a color, but I've been really keen on using this particular paint. So I just usually mix up the colors I want out of these oils. I haven't tried any more. I've tried a few other ones out of some other kits, but wasn't as happy with them because they didn't seem like they were as thick. They did not cover as well. And with this one, with putting the gray on now, see, I'm just going really heavy with it. I'll actually come back and add the weathering after I clear coat this color. This is something I could have painted these before I ever started the weathering, but just didn't want to have to worry with taping them up. So you can do that on your models if you were doing small handheld models or gaming models. Do all your primary colors first and then come back and add your weathering on top of that. Nowhere near as good as some of those guys. I don't need another hobby. I didn't mix up enough, so we'll try to mix a little more, get the same color. I did this section last because this will probably be the last section I do up here, so then I won't have a chance of actually wiping this off before getting it clear coated. You can see I got gray in some of the other spots. Just come back, wipes right off. Take a little bit of that edge off to get a little bit of yellow to show through. Okay. Go back to the black and just add to a couple of these places where we missed. Add some to the knob. Like that actually makes it look bronze. Another thing with these paints, they're really opaque if you put them on thin, so you can get your undercolor to come through. And you can see how easy that wipes off. So do that, and I think we'll call that section done. That'll conclude this video, and then we will do another one in another few days. All right, happy building.